Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here at our fourth Meet the GSEU webinar. And today with our guest, we are going to talk about our work on offshore wind farm siting. Some practical info to start. For your information, we are recording the webinar. Your microphone is muted by default. But if you want to interact with the panelists, and we are strongly encouraged to do so, so we do this kind of activity to communicate with our external audience as much as we can, please raise your hand and we give you the word during the panel discussion at the end of the presentation, or you can write your question in the chat or in the Q&A section, and I will read it out loud for you. The agenda is very simple. I will give you a quick introduction about the Geological Service for Europe. Then our group leader, Eleftheria Poyiadji, will give an introduction about our work on coast and sea. Then we have Nicola Dakin from the British Geological Survey, going to talk about more in detail about the work that we're going to do on offshore wind farm siting. These are your three speakers of today: Eleftheria for the Greek Geological Survey, Nikki from the British Geological Survey, and for the panel discussion, also Sitzen van Eteren from TNO will join the discussion. Giving you a quick introduction about the GSEU, we always started with the why. So why we wanted to do that? What you see in this slide is several headlines about a very broad range of topics, from critical raw materials to graphs of the World Bank about geothermal energy, about energy storage, the need of more offshore wind turbine, the trouble with groundwater resources. So all these things make it very clear that there is one need of high quality data. And another thing that all these headlines are in common, if we are talking about the Europe, we're going to talk about we, the world. We can find headlines about all the different geoscientific topics in all different languages. So here, for example, we have the Spiegel from Germany, Greece, France, Spain, but I could have found the same in all different European countries. So the two needs that are very clear to us is that there is a critical need of high quality subsurface data, and then pan-European problems requires pan-European effort and solutions. To the previous need, our answer is to boost our geological data platform, a GDI, from moving from a data infrastructure to a knowledge infrastructure. And about the pan-European effort, we build a huge consortia, so for 48 partners from 35 countries in Europe. Our final objective is create a sustainable permanent geological service for Europe to address specific challenges for sustainable management of the subsurface at EU national level, both onshore and offshore. This is a bit of a visualization of our way of working. So we're starting for our scope to interoperable geological data, and via research and innovation, we want to give policymaker data and knowledge to take to have our best advice possible. Our project structure is quite simple. So we cover a very broad range of topics in geology and geoscience, from raw material, geoenergies, geothermal, hydrogen storage, and permanent carbon storage, groundwater resources, coastal vulnerability, and offshore wind farm siting, that is the topic of today. And then geological framework setup is where we are building the guideline for metadata and harmonization of the data. All this work goes into a GDI, and everything that we do is publicly available and freely shared. We only operate under FAIR data and INSPIRE directive, and you can find everything, all our work will end up on a GDI platform. And this is already it from my side. Just want to remind you that we are very active in promoting and disseminating the type of work that we are doing. So you find a lot of extra information on our communication channels, so both for social media, website, and YouTube. And now I'm very happy to give the word to Eleftheria. So Eleftheria, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm sharing my presentation. Today we're gonna speak about coastal vulnerability. And so when we speak about coast and sea, we have two disciplines, coastal vulnerability and offshore wind farm siting. And what is our objective is to create products and services for all interested parties that will enable them to make informed decisions regarding the sustainable development, management, and protection of coastal environments and the seabed. So why now? Because we all know that we are all committed to a clean and resource efficient and competitive economy, with the European Green Deal designed to make Europe the first climate neutral continent in the world. So offshore renewable energy is a major source of green energy, significantly contributing to the EU's 2050 energy strategy and the European Green Deal. What is the expected result? Our aim is to show how geology impacts the stability of offshore wind farms and associated infrastructure, how the geological knowledge of European Geological Survey organizations can be used to assess site suitability, and how geological suitability can be made understandable in accessible tools. Using existing geomorphological and geological data like EMON and Mariano and Infomar datasets, and with the help of geoassessment matrix that was developed in our team, we will be able to define and assess constraints, assisting planners and engineers to define preliminary suitability zones. But you will hear more about this from Nikki. Please, Nikki.
Hi, everyone. I will also just share my screen. Okay, so yeah, hi, my name's Nikki Dakin. I'm from the British Geological Survey, and I'm really lucky to sort of head up the Optimised Wind Farm Siting section of the Geological Service for Europe. So my agenda for this talk is to sort of discuss the things that we've been developing over the last sort of year to year and a half, and probably have been thinking about it a little bit more than that. So I'll introduce the talk in terms of our introduction and some aims, go into some sort of the typical foundation types that we are discussing in terms of optimized wind farm siting in the offshore domain. Then I'll discuss some of the key deliverables that we're working towards, and there are multiple things that we're trying to do for this particular project, but one is offshore domain maps, and the other is something which we have already developed called the Geo Assessment Matrix. So I can showcase some of the early draft maps which are in development, and sort of then we can go and discuss about what we want to do next over the next sort of 5 or plus years. So why optimize wind farm siting? So the European Commission committed to transforming the EU into a clean, resource-efficient and competitive economy, with up to 60 gigawatts by 2030, which isn't that far away, and up to 300 gigawatts by 2050. And the European 2050 Energy Strategy and Green Deal is designed, as Eleftheria already said, to make Europe the first climate neutral continent in the world. And so as part of the Geological Service for Europe, what is really important between the geosurveys and everyone who works within geosurveys is to create a network between different geoscientists and engineers and geotechnical engineers. So the offshore renewable energy is a major source of green energy. So the maps on the right-hand side are from TGS's 4C onshore portal, which is a really useful resource. And just the insert there is just highlighting the amount of leases which are around, not only in the North Sea, but also up towards the Baltic. And anything that you can see with the sort of steely grey colour is any leases for offshore wind in the development zone. And then you can see in the purple, there are possibly even more. And these are offshore wind farm licensing, which are in the early concept phases of planning. And they go all the way through the different structures, all the way through to fully commissioned and working wind farms, which you can see in green. So the sea space is extremely competitive, and this is something which we're quite mindful of. So what we're trying to do is understand all of the geological data which we have, what we know, but also find out what we don't know, which will be really important for the early part of wind farm siting. So why does geology matter for offshore wind? Well, geology is the foundation of all offshore infrastructure, and being able to communicate in nice, simple terms is really essential to stakeholders, particularly people who are outside of the geological discipline, such as marine spatial planners or engineers, geotechnical engineers, offshore wind designers, for example. So from lease area conception to site development, maintenance and decommissioning, there are so many different stages of offshore wind farm development. And as part of what we're trying to do with this particular group with GSEU is this high-level characterization, providing an overview of known geological features that may impact either selecting sites, but also potentially even down the design and site development phase. So this is a really nice image from Valentin Fattal 2021. And where we sort of sit in the site evaluation to site development to site repowering and decommissioning. And when I say we, I mean the Geological Service for Europe. It's really this at the very beginning, it's the early site characterization. So we're trying to find out what data exists, what is missing, and what data is also needed. Different countries around Europe are at different phases of offshore wind farm siting. Some have so much data, they don't know what to do with it. The UK can be that. We're very lucky, we've got so many data sets that we can incorporate. But there are other countries who simply don't have that level of information. So we're trying to find a nice balance of taking the data that we know and transforming it into something which we can speak a common language between different geosurveys. For some reason, here we go. Yeah. So the aims of what we're trying to do. So like I said before, we've got multiple different aims, and we're dividing it into sort of 3 key categories. The first one, we've called it the Geo Assessment Matrix. And the idea is it's a harmonized data inventory. And we've created and written and submitted to the European Commission a methodology report. And one of the key important things between geoscientists is ensuring that everyone is talking the same language as each other. So we've tried to utilize classification schemes which are in existence already, and we're going along with the Nansen et al. 2023 classification scheme. It's a really nice, clear way of categorizing geological data, and it can be anything from onshore to more coastal domains to offshore environments. So we've gone with this particular Nansen et al. 2023. So we've actually written the report. We've got the geo assessment matrix, which I think will be openly available. It should be openly available. And what we're going to try and do with the data that we've already collected in this inventory is to actually create a suite of pan-European maps from this data inventory. And the idea behind that is so that we can showcase just how, or hopefully how useful the geoassessment matrix can be. So I can show you later in the presentation just an example of one of these derived maps using this geoassessment matrix. And then the second thing we're trying to do is the development of offshore domain maps. These are really critical and super important because they're ways that you can classify the offshore environment. And if you can do that in a way which is systematic and predictive, then you can start to look at the different types of deposition environments that are available, and therefore the different types of sediments or soils which are available as well, which need to be engineered for when designing and installing wind turbines. And this can be anything from very simple maps such as water depth maps for different foundation types to geological domains as well. And then the final and the third thing that we're going to achieve is creating a suite of thematic hazard maps. And these will be a hazard map taking data from multiple different data sources. As you're probably aware, there are so many different data portals out there, such as EMODNet and EGDI as well, along with others, such as the Hike Fault Database across most of Europe. The idea is to bring all those data together into one nice thematic hazard map. So it'll be sort of like a one-stop shop, if you like, to find out what sort of data is available, but also what is missing. Okay, so I'll go and talk about foundation types next. So for different foundation types, there are multiple key considerations. One is water depth. The second is seabed and subsurface composition, which is our geology, and that's where geoscientists come in. And then thirdly, it's metocean conditions. And all of these have a really big impact on the type of foundation which is required per site. As geoscientists, or at least in the BGS, we really only focus on water depth and the geology. We don't really look at metocean conditions, but we have multiple different partners that we could collaborate with to make sure that we're incorporating all the right information. So monopiles are the most common structure of offshore foundation types. They comprise up to 80% of all foundations present day, which could possibly change in the future. And they're essentially single large diameter steel pipes, which are power driven into the seabed. For a monopile, which is 10 megawatts, these things can be up to 10 meters in diameter and up to 120 meters high. However, there are new and bigger monopiles which have been designed, which are possibly double the height of this. Their water depths can vary can be installed between sort of 10 and 60 meters. However, as technology and everything improves, the transition and push into deeper water could possibly be possible. And the key sort of geological considerations are sediment variability and whether you have stiff or soft soils. That's just a very quick summary. There's many other geological things which can impact monopiles. And then the second is some gravity-based structures, and these are essentially wide, heavy bases which sit on the seafloor, comprising mostly reinforced concrete, and they require seabed preparation in many instances, and whether that be dredging or the development or building of gravel beds that you can put your turbine onto here. Water depths are typically a bit shallower, up to sort of 40 meters or so, and the key sort of geological constraints are the type of sediment. So you typically want a very competent soil type, whether that's a sediment or bedrock, and also topography. GBS or gravity-based structures don't like any form of topography. Then suction buckets, these are essentially cylinders with open bottoms and closed tops. And pumps are used to create pressure differentials so that they sort of sink into the sediment and stay there. Their water depths are between sort of 10 and 55 meters, and these sorts of foundations are really sensitive to seabed conditions. They don't like coarse sediments such as gravels. Then cables, these are really important features as well. If arguably without cables, you have nothing. So these are so important to understand exactly what sort of sediments are present on the seabeds and as they connect into the land as well. So we need to know the bedrock, whether there are mobile sediments available, but also the presence of peat. So geoscientists can really help sort of showcase the baseline geological understanding before any sort of decision has been made in terms of leasing. So now I'll talk about our offshore domain maps and the geo-assessment matrix. So this is just an example of some offshore domain maps. This is a particular example from water depth suitability for piles only. So we've taken the EMODNet bathymetry dataset, which is readily available from the EMODNet portal. And the idea is you can create these sorts of maps which are really suitable for high-level screening for different foundation types. So the sort of relative suitability score here is anything in red is sort of greater than 80 meters, and anything between 60 and 80 meters, which is sort of this interesting transition zone. I think maybe in the future it is possible that monopiles could potentially go into this more yellow area here. And then green is between 10 and 60 meters. So you can see sort of Northwest Europe, you've got a nice shallow platform, but there are countries which have very steep continental shelves where you'd have a very narrow ribbon which along the coastline, which would be suitable for piling, but there would be vast areas which possibly wouldn't be suitable for piling. So we're creating these sorts of maps at the moment, and these will all be available in the EGDI portal in the future. And then other offshore domain maps which are in development, and we haven't had the opportunity to sort of create these yet, but I thought it'd be worthwhile just to sort of showcase and highlight where we're going to go with it, is to include the physiographic setting, like whether things the offshore environment can be categorized in multiple different ways, but we're going to try and categorize it by shelf, slope, abyssal plain environments. And this will be a really nice high-level map to sort of highlight the typical types of sediments which you can identify on different offshore domains. And then a really important one, which is really important for Northwest Europe as well, is glaciated domains. So understanding where that key level of the maximum ice limit with the last glacial maximum, sort of 23,000 years ago, where that key level would be actually mapped. And so north of that map would be where you have glacial landforms and lots of over-consolidated sediments, really high amounts of sediment heterogeneity, all the different types of landforms, such as like moraines, pre-glacial lakes, all these sorts of things. Really fun, complicated, but really interesting features which we have a fairly good handle on, and geoscientists can really sort of help along with that sort of story, whether it's in the early conceptual phase or sort of later down the line for the ground modelling and development phase. And then the final map we'd really like to try and look at, and this probably won't be for a little while yet, is like dominant sediment types, whether it's clastic, carbonates or bedrock. And we do have a possibility to try and utilize data sets from EMODNet to create these sorts of maps, but yeah, we're just sort of waiting to see how that will turn out at the moment. So then secondly, we have the geo assessment matrix. I've only taken a very small section of the GS assessment matrix. It's very big, and just to try and keep it quite simple, we have created essentially a list of geological and geomorphological features which impact offshore wind farm siting. And that can be anything. So in terms of geology, it's essentially the lithology, whether you have peats, soft muds, diamix sands, gravels. And in terms of geomorphology, it could be anything from the presence of faults or bedrock, or whether it's either metamorphic or sedimentary or volcanic, but also things such as submarine canyons. And so the idea is that we want to create a suite of 4 different maps using our sort of dominant foundation types. Of course, floating wind will hopefully make an appearance, but I think because floating wind it's sort of almost in its infancy at the moment, we're going to see how that can be tagged onto this later down the line. But the idea is that we can take each of the different geological or geomorphological elements, and we can apply an interpreted geological complexity. And so sort of purples would be high complexity. And these would be geological features that may require detailed engineering assessments, or they will require detailed engineering assessments. And these could be anything from geohazards, such as organic soils, pockmarks, active sedimentary systems, slope instability, soft sediments. Anything sort of orangey in colour is medium complexity, and these are typically geological features which will be suitable foundations but will require additional engineering solutions. And these typically, sort of the category of things that fall into this, tend to be variable sedimentary features, so anything heterogeneous. And as I was saying before, with the glaciated domains, you get really heterogeneous sediments due to oscillating ice sheets and very complicated geological stories. So we find sort of in the north Western Europe that you get a lot of these sort of like orangey colours in our maps, but also mobile sediments, weak bedrocks, gravel, all these sorts of things. And the idea is that the purples are not no-go areas. That's really important to sort of highlight. They're just highlighting the how geologically complicated the area may or may not be. And anything yellow is a sort of lower complexity. So, and these are typically the sort of categories that fall out of into this. They tend to be more predictable sediments, whether they're homogeneous sands or layered sediments or strong bedrock, for example. So what we've done is we've created the geoassessment matrix, and this is just to highlight there are over 80 geological entries in the matrix itself. But I just wanted to sort of highlight just a few of them here. And then what we're doing, we're taking all of the different types of existing data sets which are available. So you can see EMODNet has many different modules which are super useful for us for this GSEU sort of translation. And EMODNet has submarine landscapes, geology, geomorphology, and seabed substrate. So we're utilising all of those different layers. And then Mariano, the Norwegians have an absolutely amazing database, which we can also incorporate into this. And then also INSS Infomar in Ireland as well. They also have a really fantastic offshore marine database, which is available and open for people to download and use. And what is really great about Infomar is that they're also using this Nansen et al. 2023 nomenclature, so it fits really seamlessly into the way how we're categorizing our sediments as well. So this is just a draft map. Just wanted to highlight that. But essentially what we're trying to do is the geoassessment matrix is bridging that gap between geology and engineering. And it's the first attempt of doing that. And we're taking baseline geological data, trying to simplify it in terms of its geological terminology, at a desk study phase to have that interdisciplinary understanding between geoscientists and geotechnical engineers and managers as well. So we're hoping that the Geo Assessment Matrix will be a really useful information tool for users of the EDGI portal. And then to highlight again, this information is based on the relative complexity of geology. It really does not reflect no-go or go areas. And that's something just to be really mindful of. So the map on the right-hand side is an example of the geological complexity map, based on piles and quaternary lithology only. And these are sort of maps that are in development at the moment. And we're going to be having workshops with our geological partners in the coming months to sort of go and QC all this data as well, to make sure that it all makes sense before it's put into more of an open forum than, well, more than this one. So part of being a geoscientist is being able to take very complicated geological data with a complicated geological story and transform it into something which is simple for anybody to understand. And one idea that we've had is to use hex maps, and these are really great ways of transforming the complex geological information into simple information sources for early stage assessments. So the suite of maps on the left are the examples of different geological data input sources. This is just something from internally from BGS, but we've got lots of geomorphology, seabed substrates and bedrock. And this probably doesn't mean much to everybody. So using this sort of translation and into the sort of the more hopefully simplified way of discussing things, and we can create these hex maps, and these are essentially these lower, medium, and high complexity hex maps. And the idea is on the EDGI portal is that you can click on the cells and it will give you all the information behind that cell. So the final hex maps will actually, so this is an example from EMODNet geomorphology only. And the idea is that the final hex map for a pile will have all these different layers, all incorporated into one hex map. We're not quite there yet. We're still sort of developing these as we go and speak. But hopefully it would be a nice, easy way to sort of communicate geology on a very simple, high level. So what next? And this is the final slide for me. So in the short, medium, and sort of long term, the geo-assessment matrix is complete and submitted to the European Commission. The next thing we're going to do is do a similar reporting for offshore domains. We'll probably start that later in the year into 2025. And then lastly, the thematic hazard maps that will probably start next year at some stage. And then a really important thing is making sure that all of that data is accessible digitally on the EGDI sharing data platform. So in the sort of short to medium term, we'd like to improve the visibility of what we're trying to do. It's really critical that we get feedback from people to make sure it makes sense to everyone, to make sure we haven't missed anything. And then we're also going to be reviewing and sharing our translated data sets with all of our European partners, and just to make sure that everything will make sense and that we're using the original data in the right way. And then finally, sort of in the medium to long term, we'll be loading all of these maps onto the EGDI platform. So, of course, nothing's really going to be perfect, and it will never be a perfect product, but it will hopefully be fit for purpose. And that is for this early site characterization as different countries go through their sort of offshore wind farm journey. So we would love to refine data products. So in the future, sort of, and this is probably even beyond long term, sort of 2027 plus, as we get more data, as different countries get more access to, I don't know, multi-beam data or seismic data, hopefully we should be able to incorporate that into our maps, and then also make sure that's reflected in the technology at the time as well, like I suggested with offshore floating offshore wind, if we can try and incorporate our learnings from floating into the geo-assessment matrix and the maps that we're trying to create. Okay, and I think that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I will ask you to stop sharing the screen and Eleftheria to sit to join us. I don't see yet questions. I see coming from the audience. So, well, I like to start with a couple of questions myself. So first of all, well, we talk a lot about geology. Nikki showed us a lot of maps. So what are the biggest challenges in making geological data understandable, especially for policymakers, but also not in general, not geological stakeholders during the planning? Who wants to start?
Well, perhaps.
Yeah, Sitsa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I barely beat you, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps one of the most important things, and it was nicely accentuated by Nikki in her presentation, is that the biggest challenge for us as geologists is to move away from geology, because geology in itself is often quite difficult to explain to non-experts. So we really have to think of ways to create output for non-geologists using non-geological terminology that is understandable to everyone just by pure intuition. So that is, I think, one of the key things we have to do, and that also means that we have to avoid getting caught in sort of details and nuance and uncertainty. Those are all very practical and important to us as experts. But from an overall perspective of guiding the rollout of offshore wind, we need to make very clear-cut applied products.
Thank you, Sitsa. Nikki.
Yeah, I mean, Sitsa summarized it really nicely. And I'm a very detailed-oriented person, and sometimes it pains me of how much information I have to strip back. It's really tempting to put everything into one map, but unfortunately that makes no sense to most of the people, and it's why we really want to trial using these hex maps. It's sort of a very easy way to take a step back a little bit, and sort of, although it merges the boundaries between all these different geological complications, if a country is only just starting its offshore wind journey, it doesn't need all that level of complication. So I think the hex maps have a really nice way to try and sort of merge some of that complexity. Thank
you. And I mean, all this work is going to end up into a GDI. Why is it important that the work that you do will end up in our platform?
Can I just say something, add something for the previous question?
Of course.
As coming from Greece, an area where we don't have many existing geological data, I would urge the geologists to find more geological data and to share them, because we have the tools, but in order to give information, we need geological data first. That is not the case for maybe a lot of countries in Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you. So going back to a GDI, so why is important that everything you do is going to end up there?
So, I mean, ETGI is an incredible source of information. And actually, before starting GSEU, I wasn't even aware of its presence, which is terrible, I know. But now, if I need anything, ETGI EMODnet, those sorts of data portals are my first port of call. And I'd really like to hope that the open source data sets that we create by sort of having these conversations, it will make people aware of what's available as well. So we're hoping that it will be a way that anyone interested in the offshore sort of domain, it will be their sort of one place to go to for sort of applied geological data, not just baseline geological maps.
Yeah. Thank you, Nikki.
I think one of the important things also about EGDI is that it's about more than offshore wind or coast and sea. What we have to do when we do spatial management is we have to make decisions between alternative uses. Sometimes we can combine them, but sometimes they're really competitive or incompatible. And EGDI shows all these different elements, so you can make comparisons. So you add your own piece of the puzzle to a much larger whole. So that's important about EGDI. And a similar case can be made for EMODnet. And there it is a multidisciplinary thing where you add geology to biology, physics, chemistry, seabed habitats, and other uses. So those two portals are really important for us to disseminate what we discover in this project.
Thank you, Shitze. Eleftheria, you want to integrate or we move to the next question?
I would like to add again that in EGDI we have all, offshore and onshore. So you can see the very schematic data in both disciplines. We hope that it will be the case.
Thank you. And there is, I think, a question for you, Nikki, in the chat. Why did you go for hexagon shapes instead of the standard pixels?
So hexes, I think, were developed by Uber to sort of have a better understanding of people who needed cabs rather than in certain areas. And hexes are really really nice shape to use, because if we were just to use pixels, like squares, I suppose, you only have 4 sides, and so when you're putting a lot of data together, it better connects circular shapes together, so you get a better representative outcome using a hex as opposed to a square.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope that this answers your question. I'd like to touch 2 different topics now. It is about ecological footprint and investors. So let's start with the ecological footprint. So how does this the work that you do and in general in all your group Eleftheria support making decision that also tend not only to reduce the geological risk but also the ecological footprint in installing offshore wind farms?
I would pass this question to Nikki and Shitze because they are more in their discipline. Who wants to?
I can have a stab.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the ecology of the sea is pivotal. It's the most important thing in terms of offshore development, and it's taken extremely seriously. So, I mean, we have lots of marine protected areas around the coast of the UK, and I'm sure everyone has different acronyms for similar things, just to make sure that the benthic habitats and I don't know, breeding grounds for crabs and lobsters are really well protected. So to make, but firstly, to do that, I think enough information has to go into sort of understanding what is there to begin with. So multi-beam data is a really nice way to identify where you may have like cold water corals, well, at least in the UK, cold water corals and these are really important species. And then the regulator can then go ahead to sort of understand what that baseline data is, what the baseline information is for different types of creatures of the sea. And then, so if any offshore development does happen, then we know what's there and we know how to protect it better than if we had no information. Fisheries as well, these are really important for different countries of all, and the economy for all countries. So yeah, to understand where like fish are found, and also birds as well. Birds are extremely important to understand where they nest and where they forage. And but to have all that information, you need that baseline data to begin with. And once you have that baseline data, then you can start to develop sort of where we want to site offshore wind.
Perhaps I can add to that when we talk about footprint, we often think about negative footprints, right? We put something in and something will suffer. But there can also be an opportunity somewhere. And that's something we should not forget. And that's certainly something that we can highlight by providing surrogates that create at least a visualization of the potential for a certain habitat type to establish itself under new wind farm development related conditions. So there we can combine geology as in its static and dynamic aspects with a measure that's being taken by us to see and predict what will happen if we help nature a little bit here and there.
Thank you, Sitze. So we have another question for Nikki, and a compliment and amazing work as always from Gareth. He's asking if there are any plans to amalgamate the various layers into a single map layer for each foundation type.
Yeah, that is the plan, because otherwise we run the risk of having multiple maps, and when I say multiple, probably over 10. And in the interest of having that simplified story, the idea would be to have lots of different layers made into one final layer. And then on the EGGI platform, the hexes, I think I might have said it, the hexes will be interrogatable, so you can click on them and then you can see what data has gone in to create that final hex map. So that, and we'll do that for each of the foundation types. So I imagine at least, 4 different maps. So one for cables, one for monopiles, the other for suction buckets and gravity-based structures. There'll be 4 maps, but with multiple data sets incorporated into them.
Thank you, Nikki. Then I have one last question before, if the audience doesn't have any extra. So we know that, toward the backstop for investors to that are a bit slowing down the deployment of, for example, offshore wind farm, but not only, are about the risk associated to it and, for example, the timeline for getting a permit. So how does the work that you guys are doing is helping on this?
I suppose with I don't know, with any commodity, I always see that there's always sort of boom and bust trends, and that's not something to be afraid of, so to speak. And then if anything, in a downturn, that's when, if there is a downturn, I think things are sort of changing, like in my sort of opinion, in the last sort of 6 months at least. That should be the time where you sort of take stock of what is available, and then you can like go, really hard on the interpretation. And by the time it comes back up again, you're going to have all these wonderful data products. So I sort of foresee offshore wind being a bit like any commodity in that way.
And to add to that, I would say that one of the things we do here is we differentiate between areas requiring major, moderate, minor surveying, simply said, right? But that means that that will help you to focus your efforts and resources better than you did and than you could before. And that automatically means that you can reduce time and cost that you spend or need to spend in the preparatory phase. So that means, time gained. Time gained is always good, but it also means that you can use less resources, and that means that you might have to do fewer surveys, more efficient surveys. So that will also save you money. So on both of these aspects, I think that will definitely help. And we all know that it's very expensive to develop these wind farms. So even a 1% savings is a lot in terms of real money.
Thank you, Sietse. We have a question from Natalia. If you are planning to develop maps similar to the geology one for the environmental consideration limitation for like go no go decision for development of offshore construction.
Shall I answer that one? I mean, that would be incredible if we had the time to do that. I think for this particular phase of GSEU, we sort of only have a limited time at the beginning, and I think in the future that would be something that we would love to incorporate. I think it's really important that we try to somehow, but it's not our plan in the sort of short term, but possibly in the future.
And then I can implement a little bit on this, Nikki, because in June I was at the EEA in Copenhagen, and to talk about something completely different, but I want to give a bit of a general introduction as well. And then as soon as they saw the map of the offshore wind farm with the hexagon that you showed today, they really loved it, and they put me in touch with a group of marine protection. And they are very interested in finding ways to combine your work and what we are doing.
Yeah, I think that would be so prudent. How I'm open to suggestions.
Well, one of the nice things about GSEU, right, and EGDI as well, is that we are really focusing on connectedness. So we want to develop modules as part of tools where we can fit in tools or modules from external parties, but also the other way around. If external parties can take our modules and make them fit. So the platform we choose, but also the ease with which we can translate that information into a format that can be used by others is something that we will take up in a different work package. Well, I shouldn't mention the word work package Francesco told us, but in a different part of GSEU, people are really focusing on how to develop EGDI, so the data infrastructure, and that will help us to make this connection between the EA information, our information, and lots of other information, not just geological, but everything that pertains to the seabed subsurface and surface.
Thank you very much, Sietse. I think we are reaching to the end of our webinar. I love the interaction. Thank you very much, Eleftheria. Thank you very much, Sietse, and bigger thank you to Nikki for the beautiful presentation and the work early on so far. Great that we have almost 50 people connected for the entire webinar. And quick remember, please following us on our social media communication and YouTube channel to get all the news about the GSEU. And I hope to see you all to the next Meet the GSEU webinar in a couple months. Bye, everybody.
So, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.